Prime Minister Modi's National Security Advisor Ajit Doval held a high-stakes meeting with Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi and reiterated that India will never compromise on national defense and security. Doval demanded that China must respect the LAC and pass border agreements with New Delhi. The meeting comes just days after unconfirmed reports of a few Chinese troops coming dozens of kilometers inside Indian territory in Arunachal Pradesh, with Chinese graffiti and food packets found at the site. While the Indian government has rejected any such reports of PLA incursion along the unmarked border as incorrect, all the focus turned to the high-stakes Doval-Wang Yi meeting being held on the sidelines of the ongoing BRICS NSA meeting in St. Petersburg, Russia, which is being hosted by Vladimir Putin. NSA Doval also paid his respects to the Russian president. The two intelligence veterans from the FSB and RAW shared a warm exchange with a smile and a firm handshake. But for India, while historic ties with Russia remain strong, the big worry for the country is the ongoing border standoff with China, where thousands of troops from the Indian Army and the Indian Air Force remain even today locked in a border standoff with the PLA. At the meeting, Doval reiterated that China must respect the LAC for peace with India. The MEA revealing, quote, "Both sides agreed to work with urgency and redouble their efforts to realize complete disengagement in the remaining areas." NSA conveyed that peace and tranquility in the border areas and respect for the LAC are essential for normalcy in bilateral relations, unquote. The meeting also comes days after reports that after 31 rounds of border meetings, the Chinese PLA has agreed to pull back and for mutual disengagement at Demchok, one of the final two friction points along the border apart from Depsang way up north near the Karakoram Pass, where the PLA is well dug inside previously neutral territory. The MEA added, quote, "The meeting gave the two sides an opportunity to review the recent efforts towards finding an early solution of the remaining issues along the line of actual control, which will create conditions to stabilize and rebuild bilateral relations," unquote. Doval's firm stance on China was echoed by India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar, who claimed that 75% of border issues have been resolved, but the remaining will depend on China respecting the pre-2020 status quo ante. Jaishankar stated, quote, "Now those negotiations are ongoing. We made some progress. I would say roughly, you can say about 75% of the disengagement problems are sorted out." The Indian External Affairs Minister was speaking at the Global Center for Security Policy in Geneva. He warned of a much bigger problem of massive militarization of the LAC due to Chinese salami slicing in 2020, which increased the risk of unintended conflicts simply due to the close proximity of thousands of troops at the border. Jaishankar added, quote, "We still have some things to do. There is a bigger issue that both of us have brought forces close up, and in that sense, there is a militarization of the border. How does one deal with it? I think we have to deal with it. In the meanwhile, after the clash, it has affected the entirety of the relationship because you cannot have violence at the border and then say the rest of the relationship is insulated from it," unquote. While Doval and Wang Yi met in Russia, Jaishankar also highlighted how there is a breakdown of trust in New Delhi towards China due to Chinese aggression in the middle of the COVID pandemic, which emerged from Wuhan in China and crippled the world. The EM elaborated further, quote, "What happened in 2020 was violation of multiple agreements for some reasons which are still entirely not clear to us. We can speculate on it. The Chinese actually moved a very large number of troops to the line of actual control at the border, and naturally in response we moved our troops up. It was very difficult for us because we were in the middle of a COVID lockdown at the time," unquote. Tensions remain high as both India and China have deployed around 50 to 60,000 troops at the LAC, and the threat of a larger conflict remains large. After his meeting with NSA Doval, the Chinese FM expressed hope that India and China can reset their ties. Wang Yi stated, quote, "China and India should adhere to independence, choose unity and cooperation, and insist on mutual achievement and avoid mutual consumption. I believe that both the sides have the wisdom and ability to view each other in the right light, properly handle differences with pragmatic attitude, find the right way for two neighboring major countries to get along with each other with constructive thinking, and push China-India relations back on the track of healthy, stable and sustainable development," unquote. Meanwhile, recent reports of Chinese incursion into Arunachal have been denied by the government, with Union Minister Kiren Rijiju stating that overlapping of patrolling areas often takes place along undemarcated areas, adding, quote, China cannot take our land. Overlapping of patrolling does take place in undemarcated areas. They are not allowed to construct anything permanent. There is strict vigil from our side. Mere painting of marks in undemarcated locations does not mean the areas have been encroached on, unquote. However, such misleading news often gains large traction on social media, which in turn raises bilateral tensions.
Our Indian forces and the Chinese forces keep crossing to each other.
Any such misadventure by the PLA has the potential to provoke a firm response from the Indian army and might even lead to an India-China war. However, there is already an ongoing war in Ukraine. Prime Minister Modi made a recent visit to Kiev to meet Ukrainian President Zelensky, where he once again urged the two sides to enter peace negotiations without wasting time. NSA Doval informed President Putin that PM Modi had himself ordered the NSA to brief the Russian president on the Ukraine visit and developments.
And he wanted me to come specially and personally and brief you.
Calling Indian Prime Minister Modi a great friend, Vladimir Putin has now invited Indian Prime Minister for a bilateral meeting on the sidelines of the BRICS summit in Kazan next month. Modi's last meeting and a hug with Putin during their July summit had caused quite a few ripples in the West back then. Russia could also become the venue for a highly significant Modi-Xi Jinping meeting if Indian military and Chinese PLA commanders can agree to a disengagement at the border before then. But the big question remains, despite all the CCP promises of respecting bilateral agreements, can India actually trust China to disengage completely at the LAC? Leave a comment with your opinion, hit the like button, and remember to subscribe to Inconnect News.